Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Views on News. I'm your host, Umar Khalid. But today we're going to talk about the whole gamut of relations between Pakistan and the United States of America. Why? Because a lot has changed and is still changing when we talk about the current status of the relationship between the two countries. Pakistan has wanted a strong and equitable relationship with the US, but on the other hand, from the US there have been mixed reactions, whether it be from the US Senate or whether it be from other quarters. There is this blow hot, blow cold attitude from the United States of America, something that we have seen in the past as well with Pressler amendments, with the past relationship between the two countries, all in the context of what is happening in Afghanistan. Also in the past, its blow hot, blow cold attitude has been related to Afghanistan, and somehow we have this thought that whenever the US kind of warms up to Pakistan or develops a cold attitude towards Pakistan, it's in relationship to what is happening in Afghanistan. Is it the same this time as well, or is there more to it? We will be talking in detail on this and more. And before further ado, we will be, of course, talking about certain important aspects of today. Let's go to some important issues concerning the gamut of relationship between Pakistan and the United States of America. Now, there's a press release that has come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that says that the legislation that is in the US Senate as such includes references to Pakistan that are completely unwarranted. We find all such references inconsistent with the spirit of Pakistan-US cooperation on Afghanistan since the year 2001, including the facilitation of the Afghan peace process and during the recent evacuations of American and other nationals from Afghanistan. Then this press release further says that Pakistan has consistently maintained that there is no military solution to the conflict in Afghanistan. Similarly, a coercive approach will not work. It adds that sustained security cooperation between Pakistan and the United States would remain critical in dealing with any future terrorist threat in the region. Such proposed legislative measures are therefore uncalled for and counterproductive. Shah Mahmood Qureshi Sahab, our foreign minister, has also said, and I quote, Pakistan will protect its interests and defend its position. The United States has to understand the role played by Pakistan in facilitating the peace process. In Afghanistan, of course, he was referring to that. Then he also said that scapegoating Pakistan would in fact mean overlooking the ground realities. There are lobbies in the US and our neighbors in the region who would like to play this up. And of course, we all know who these lobbies are. Now, let me introduce my guests to you with whom we'll be in discussion on this and more. In the studios, we've been joined by Brigadier retired Tariq Zaman Sahab. He's a senior analyst. Brigadier Sahab, thank you very much. Walaikum assalam and welcome to our show. And online, we've been joined by two eminent guests, one from Germany, the other from the United States. The first is from POTSDAM in Germany, Mr. Harley Schlanger. He joins us, of course, from Germany, and he's a political analyst from the Schiller Institute. Thank you, sir, to have joined us and to have given us the time. Our second guest, ladies and gentlemen, joins us from Washington in the United States. His name is Khurram Shehzad, and he's an expert on foreign affairs. Let's begin with you, Harley Schlanger. Welcome to our show. And I'd like to understand your perspective from a European point of view on why the United States of America has had a very strange tangent of relationship when it comes to Pakistan, despite all the assurances that have been given by our country over the last decades.
Well, just to correct you, I'm actually an American, but I live in Germany now, but I can give you a European and an American perspective. I think the problem we have is that there's still a commitment among the political establishment in the United States and the intelligence and military establishment to the idea of geopolitics, which incorporates the idea that there may still be military solutions. And in fact, we just saw that that was completely demolished by the events in Afghanistan. So why would you have a group in the US Senate that will be blaming Pakistan, almost as though Pakistan bears some responsibility for the failure of the US policy in Afghanistan?
But I mean, adding to it, why pass a bill? Why criticize Pakistan so much when we know exactly how much Pakistan has worked towards peace in Afghanistan, how much it has cooperated with the United States of America in forging a peace deal between the then Afghan government and the Afghan Taliban?
Well, this has more to do with U.S. politics than any serious approach to foreign relations. The the obvious idea is that you should have the United States working with the neighbors of Afghanistan, including the extended troika, which includes Pakistan. But U.S. policy is shaped by this idea of unilateralism and the rules-based order. And the U.S. gets to make many people in the U.S. Congress who don't like the idea that we're ending wars, that the Biden administration says it intends to end the endless wars. The military-industrial complex doesn't want to end the endless wars. So there's a real fight in the U.S., and what we're seeing with the bill from Senator Risch is a reflection of this idea that everyone has to play by our rules, and if you don't, you're the outsider, you're the bad guy.
So Pakistan is being made the scapegoat of internal politics in the United States of America. Is that right?
I would say that's one way of looking at it, and that's because there are still people unwilling to evaluate why this war happened, what was the result, and there's a running away from accountability. The military, the intelligence community, and the political community all have responsibility for this failed policy. The American people want to be out of wars. We're not more secure by these wars. We're actually less secure and more poor. But the whole question of security is not being taken seriously in the United States. And security does mean economic cooperation and development, mutual benefit. And that's something that too many people in the Congress don't understand when they're campaigning for votes.
All right. So does warmongering benefit the United States? That is what you're trying to say. And that is why there is an internal rift within the U.S.
Well, I wouldn't say it benefits the people of the United States. It benefits a very small segment of the population, which is President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. It's not just defense contractors, it's consultants, it's construction companies, it's people who collected some of the $7 trillion from these recent wars in the last 20 years. That doesn't go to the American people. It goes to a very select group of people. And then they complain about corruption in Afghanistan. The U.S. Investigation from the Senate into where the money went found an enormous amount of the corruption was within the U.S. contractors. So it benefits a very small group of people. But I think this is why the American people are beginning to realize that there's no security from these wars, and it certainly is not an economic benefit. And the idea of imposing sanctions, possibly on Pakistan, is insane. I think this idea of using sanctions to punish countries that don't do what the elite in the United States want is a disaster. In some ways, it's worse than war because the people who suffer the most are the non-combatants.
I totally agree with you on that. I'll go to my second guest now, Khurram Shehzad. What's your take on this political wrangling or maneuvering in the US or differences in the US that are putting Pakistan and trying to put Pakistan in this whole blame game for something that it does not deserve?
Umar, thank you for having me on your show. So this, if you look into the bill, this bill is all Republican bill, which means it is more to push to tight the Biden administration. What we have looked into the bill, we have seen Afghanistan, most of the context on Afghanistan, but some segments in the bill are related to the Pakistan. But overall, the bill is about tightening the Biden's position in the political arena in Washington across America. So, but on the other hand, if we see the 20 years of history with the U.S.-Pakistan relation, there are we see two major dynamics to it. One, State Department, the narrative coming from the lobbyists, the think tanks, the popular people's decision, and then the politician itself. And the second one is coming from the Pentagon, which is the established, which we call it in Pakistan establishment. Establishment always wanted to have the ground, looking into the ground reality than having better relationship with Pakistan. But on the other hand, State Departments, if you see the Salala incident, for example, President Obama, it never apologized, which took U.S.-Pakistan relationship on stake, and the anti-state actors for 1 year, they took advantage of it. The same goes with other policies when it comes to the Osama bin Laden and other policies. So I see this more of a political position as compared to the sanctioning Pakistan. One thing we need to look into is the U.S. admits the journal, U.S.-Pakistan, the journals who participated into the Afghanistan war, they admitted in the hearing that we lost the war. We lost the war because of strategic mistakes in 20 years. It didn't happen in 20 days. It happened in 20 years. We lost the war.
Of course.
Now, U.S. we like it or not, U.S. is a superpower. He will do everything. U.S. will do everything to blame Pakistan, to put Pakistan into the spot. The reason is, if you look into the 2019 CIA report, which is on the website, it says that China is the #1 enemy of U.S. It's economic reason, it's international influence reason, it's the dominance on the sea, all those reasons, which is China. Now, Pakistan is more close to China, so which is also put Pakistan against the U.S. interest in the region. So there are so many factors to it that this bill, but another thing is that since Democrats are not part of the bill, there's very less likely that this will ever get into any law or any
But nevertheless, Khurram, the fact remains that there is a bill that is in the Senate. There is a certain sentiment against Pakistan. That is nothing new. Despite all the efforts that Pakistan has been making, not since now, since decades, despite all the assurances that Pakistan has been giving to the international body, including the United States of America, how can Pakistan change the mindset? Why isn't this mindset changing? And you know, when it comes to our not so friendly neighbor India, the whole equation is totally different despite what it is involved in. Why this discrimination?
It is more of a national interest of America. America has, from 2007, when America signed nuclear peace agreement with India. Since then, we have seen America is doing everything to please India in the region, in the international affairs. The only thing is Pakistan dependency. Pakistan has a lot of dependency, financial dependency to IMF and World Bank, which makes us vulnerable for Pakistan to accept certain circumstances when the equation is not, like you said, the equation is not equal.
All right.
The narrative which is going into the media, it is coming from the government that Pakistan, blaming Pakistan all along, even though today we have seen the US admits that there were strategic mistakes within during the war. So I think even it's a Democrat, it's a Republican, they are playing blame game with Pakistan to please India itself.
All right, let's come to the studios and let's talk to Brigadier Zaman. Brigadier Zaman, Pakistan, you know very well, has always tried to have a very pragmatic approach when it comes to its relationship with the important countries, whether it be the United States of America, whether it be with China, even with India. It has tried its level best to create a certain harmonious relationship. But there are some that react positively, there are some that never do, despite all the positive signs that Pakistan has been giving to all of these countries. Why is that? Let's talk with perspective to the United States of America. Why? This is a question that I'd really like to understand.
You just see that Pakistan has been very close ally with all the NATO forces right from the beginning in peacekeeping process. Not only in this region, you just see Pakistan has been sending its peacekeeping contingents, military contingents all over the world, whenever United Nations required it. And that is continuing till today. Well within this region, right from 2001, Pakistan has supported them with utter sincerity. And in the process, we have suffered a lot. We have lost around 70,000 plus human lives. Most of them, they are army soldiers, officers.
Around 150 billion in economy.
And yes, a huge loss in the economy as well. And we had been suffering throughout this process. But simultaneously, we had been supporting them. And this now at this stage, once they are blaming Pakistan, that is just maybe that due to the political reasons within their own country, because once they went unsuccessful after having lost from this place, they have faced a lot of criticism from within themselves as well. Then secondly, again, you didn't name, but I would just openly name it as well, that our arch rival India, because they have strong influence within their senators as well. And this bill, once it has been presented on this last Monday, around 22 of them, that is just a bill at the moment. This will go under discussion in that process. But that is very unfortunate. You just see the contents of that bill. One, that Pakistan has not supported them and they are trying to make a scapegoat to the Pakistan. Then secondly, making a process, building a process to impose sanctions on Pakistan. Just for nothing.
But sir, what I don't understand is they should also remember the fact that when the Afghan Taliban took over Kabul, it was us, Pakistan, who brought their people to our country, and from there they managed to go to their own.
Yes, that we did. And we had been supporting right from the beginning, but we have suffered a lot as well in the process. And now you see, until the last, once they wanted to go away from this place, the Qatar peace process, that has been arranged by Pakistan.
Of course.
Now, just you see that within their own Senate, Senator Chris Vaughan, while talking to Tahir Javed, that Democrat of Pakistan, he also criticized America. He said that they should not blame Pakistan, rather they should blame themselves, and not themselves, even Trump. They said that once they got their prisoners in the Qatar Doha conference, once they got their prisoners released, that is Taliban's prisoners from Pakistan and Ashraf Ghani, and they supported them in a process. And that's how the Kabul fell. Now, if at this stage they are blaming Pakistan just for nothing, that Pakistan has been strategically supporting them and tactically supporting them and even lessening them and training them. This is very unfair. You know, over 48 or 50 countries, they were there. Their intelligence, best of the best intelligence, everything was there. Had there been anything at that stage, that should have been brought there. Brought in and brought into the limelight. So they even now intelligence gathering is not difficult. Once you have so much people and so much agencies over there, even a single episode would have been there that should have been pointed out there and then.
Brigadier Sahib, you remember the Iraq war, don't you? Remember the the instruments of mass destruction and all of the reason for which the weapons of mass destruction were due to which they invaded Iraq, and at the end there was no weapons.
There was nothing.
There was nothing. So you know this the whole strategy of involving a country in a blame game is so strong by the US that comes a time that everyone starts believing it.
That's true, but I think that ground realities are very clear nowadays, Umar. It's not, entire world knows it, let me tell you. Entire world knows it, that if they want to make Pakistan as an scapegoat, they are just trying to, you know, cover up their own failure. And this will not work, let me tell you, because Pakistan has been very sincere, and this is so unfortunate at this stage, after having gained everything, even until last, you know, that their own troops and soldiers, the only airline of Pakistan, PIA, was operating, bringing them and sending them safe and secure. And after having sent them, you know, the team in New Zealand, they refused to come there. Pakistan is not a safe country.
No, they came, but they left at the level.
And they left it. And then UK's team,
but they have apologized since then.
They apologized, but well, that is if you allow, I'll say in Urdu that ki mere qatl ke baad usne jafa se toba, hai us zude peshema ka peshema hona. After having done it, now apologize, you slap somebody and say that sorry.
I agree.
That's not fair.
I agree. Yeah. Let's go back to Harley Schlanger. Harley, I mean, you must be listening to all of this discussion. In the whole context, what do you feel is the sentiment within the United States of America? We have understood the political issues that exist within the US, but what is the US public thinking as far as Pakistan is concerned, or the relationship between the two countries?
Well, I think it's important to look back to what happened in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected because Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate, but because she was also a candidate for war, to go to war with Syria, to continue the wars. And the American people were beginning to experience war fatigue. And I think it's even bigger now. And the effort to use the the collapse of the U.S. to say, well, we have to send more troops, we need more activity there. Most Americans don't agree with that. The polls are showing that Americans want to be out of these wars. So I think what we're seeing is a potential for a significant shift in the United States. It's not going to come from the Republicans because they're more closely allied with the military-industrial complex. But beware of the Democrats as well. Remember, when President Trump first wanted to move troops out of Syria, there was a resolution passed by both parties in the Senate against that. So there's a real problem here when you're dealing with the political situation in the United States. But I want to go back to one thing that Khurram Shehzad said. You can't look at this situation without seeing the U.S.-China policy in the background. And the whole talk about a pivot from the Southwest Asia into the Indo-Pacific region, the Quad, the AUKUS agreement with Australia and the United Kingdom, this is part of a move or a shift of geopolitical targeting. And I think that especially from the war party, there's opposition to Pakistan, partly due to the relationship historically of Pakistan with China. So I think we're dealing with a multiplicity of factors. But the biggest problem politically is that the war party controls both parties in the United States. Geopolitics, and by geopolitics, I mean specifically British geopolitics, control over Eurasia, preventing the Belt and Road Initiative, which was a major focus of the recent G7 summit. All of that plays into this because Pakistan can play a key role with China in extending the Belt and Road Initiative as a way of dealing with the humanitarian crisis. Pardon me?
I say it's continuing to play that role as far as strengthening the BRI or strengthening the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And maybe this is what irks the United States of America. But what I don't understand, Harley, is that in the whole gamut of relationship between countries, whether it be Pakistan and the US, Pakistan and China, Pakistan and Russia, when we see our not so friendly neighbor, this is how I'd quote it, India, its relationship with Russia and India's relationship with the US. I mean, both the countries continue to have the relationship with India, don't they? It is not at the behest of one that the other is not continuing its relationship. Why can't the US continue in the same vein? Pakistan wants a relationship with the US. Pakistan has been doing all the moves in the right direction strategically and politically. Why doesn't the US understand? Why is it so hell-bent? I mean, I'd really like to use that word in kind of placing Pakistan in a certain context when it comes to China?
Well, I would say instead of taking it so personally, it has very little to do with Pakistan. Look at the U.S. policy towards Russia right now. Look at the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. Look at the Caesar sanctions against Syria, sanctions against Yemen, sanctions against China over the phony Xinjiang province human rights violations. What you have is a geopolitical doctrine which says for the U.S. to remain the unilateral power, and when I say U.S., I mean the U.S. and the British together. The U.S. has taken over the role of the empire, but it's using the same doctrine of geopolitics that the British did.
True.
Keep the world divided, keep countries fighting. And instead, I see, and what we see at the Schiller Institute, is a potential now for a significant change from the rest of the world. Europe is going under. The U.S. economy is in terrible shape, but we're seeing growth in China. We're seeing the Belt and Road Initiative moving through Southwest Asia into Africa, a potential for the future for billions of people. And instead of becoming a part of that, the financial interests in the United States tied to the City of London are trying to stop it. That's why they're pushing this alternative plan, which is no plan whatsoever except stop China.
But in the long run, don't you feel, Harley, that this is going to be counterproductive for the United States, economically or even strategically?
Of course it's counterproductive, just like the 20 years of war was counterproductive, just like using the International Monetary Fund to impose conditionalities on countries that don't do what the Western bankers want is counterproductive.
FATF, another example.
Well, I think the question here is we have to get people in the United States to think more broadly about the world the way we did after World War II, when the United States, after defeating Germany and Japan, helped rebuild them. Why not do that in Afghanistan? I see these American politicians say, oh, the Taliban is going to mistreat the women and children of Afghanistan. Well, what do these sanctions do? They're going to kill the women and children of Afghanistan. How can you claim to be concerned with women's rights when you're starving a nation which has been through literally 40 years of war? So we've
And no
got to get
development
enough of the-
whatsoever. Have you seen the development in Afghanistan? The trillions of dollars that have been put in by the US. What effect have you seen once they've left after these 20 years? It's in the same shambles, isn't it?
Well, the idea of nation building in this form doesn't work because the nation building was being done by contractors trying to impose a certain conception, but without bringing the people of Afghanistan in as partners. That's why the Belt and Road Initiative is different. And that's what's a threat to the London financial interests, to the Wall Street financial interests, that China is saying we want mutually beneficial economic development. And as you said, Pakistan is a key partner in that. And if you had China, Pakistan, and Russia working together to build development corridors through Afghanistan, not just humanitarian aid, but actually building up a real modern infrastructure, that's the solution. Otherwise, you're going to have more civil war and chaos.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Harley. Now let's come to Khurram Shehzad. Geopolitical doctrine when it comes to that of the government, of the institutions, or the people of the United States of America. What can make the change in the right direction as far as that whole doctrine is concerned? Do you feel that change is possible? Do you feel change isn't possible? And if it is, how can that happen?
To be honest, after this 15 August, when the Taliban took over the Kabul, I think it is too late for any change in the region when it comes to the U.S. foreign policy for Pakistan. The reason is we U.S. have spent 20 years in that place, trillions of dollars, many lives we have lost, and then we are admitting there was a strategic mistake. And then since then, I have seen at least 75 different discussions from different think tanks, including Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, and the Wilson Center, and all those different think tanks here. Everybody is looking into the possibility of sanctioning Pakistan. What is the benefit? What is the outcome? What we are going to achieve? That was never considered as an option. And they wanted to sanction so badly, just like you mentioned, they were looking for WMD before the Iraq war. And the same go with the other wars. So when I look into the people's opinion here in Washington and across America, I have seen people just wanted to stay within their, because of the troubling economy, people wanted to stay within their own domestic issues instead of going out for the more wars and more geopolitical changes around the world. The same goes when you look into the President Biden, straightforwardly said there was no nation building. We didn't went there, even though we have at least 3 presidents were having this statement. We are there for nation building, but President Biden did not reluctant for a second saying we never went there for nation building. Same goes when it comes to the policy for Pakistan. Pakistan's service for 20 years, nobody wants to talk about in Washington about those services. And even though yesterday one of the generals said we still need Pakistan. Pakistan even more relevant because Pakistan is getting close to China. So that was the statement coming from the statement from the hearing. And also Pakistan, the relevance is because of U.S. interests established for 20 years. Who's going to safeguard those interests in the region? So the Pentagon, the establishment, have a good relationship with Pakistan establishment, Pakistan military establishment. That is never broken in the last 20 years. The only piece is broken is the foreign affairs, the State Department's politically motive from the Democrat and Republican to Democrat think tanks, lobbyists. Those things are getting in place. Like if I give you the example of Mark Warner, who's the chair of Senator Mark Warner, who's chair of Indian caucus here. So he's behind the motive,
But of course, that is understandable because that's the Indian caucus and that is what India wants, doesn't it?
Definitely. I mean, if you look into the history of this bill, the Republicans were the part of the bill. If you look into the history, there are so many lobbyists who have direct connection with the Indian diaspora across America. But what is Pakistan's take into that? Pakistan, the best, I think in this, for the bill and for moving forward, the best interest for Pakistan is to have more influence in the political arena on both sides, Democrat and Republican. Like our analyst mentioned, a senator from Maryland, he was born in Pakistan, but he he is in the best favor in Pakistan when it comes to the diaspora, U.S.-Pakistan relation and the development, and especially the bill which currently in the process of, it's a bipartisan bill which wanted to have a development zone on the Afghanistan-Pakistan borders. So that instead of giving the money to the governments, U.S. will be promoting those developmental areas where the production will happen and the duty-free products will come to America. So the dimensions of the relationship will all based on how we sit with China. If we're sitting with China with all our options, then U.S. behavior will be different. If you see the most recent this submarine incident between France and U.S. and Australia,
The AUKUS deal.
President Biden actually went one step ahead and make sure that the relationship won't go bad. So Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, and the Middle East. I mean, they are in the so-called pact. That anybody who comes after their interests, they will be fighting together. So Pakistan sitting with China, I think it's a big conflict of interest.
All right. So in this conflict of interest, where does that leave Pakistan as far as its relationship with these countries that you've just mentioned that do not want anything to happen against this interest, and they all feel, especially the United States of America, that whoever so allies itself with China is not an ally. I mean, I'm just saying hypothetically, is not an ally of the United States of America or its allies as well. Do you feel this whole attitude or this whole, the methodology that the US is applying towards its international partners is going to create more multipolarity in the whole world, something that the world does not want or need even?
To be honest, here in politicians, people, policymakers, and the public opinion is all against Pakistan. So they don't even care what is happening with Pakistan. They don't even care what is going to happen with the Pakistan. They don't even look into the aspects or what is going to be the outcome in next 5 years when we sanction Pakistan or we try to build another block into the region. What are the consequences? They don't even care. If you can see the evacuation of Afghanistan, they didn't even look back into the aspects of the economics or the stability or the peace or the military solutions to that. So when it comes to the U.S.-Pakistan or moving forward, how we see the whole scenario will go, I think Pakistan has to. That is the voice coming from the people who really like Pakistan here in America. They wanted to have Pakistan self-sufficient, so they don't look into America for military or other economic benefits. They wanted to have Pakistan to use the youth, which is more than 60% of the youth.
Of course. Or even work in other avenues such as climate change, for which even Chami Qureshi Sahab, when he was in New York very recently, talked about that there are so many other avenues that both countries can work on together, cooperate together. But somehow, somewhere, as far as the US is concerned, their foreign policy kind of more or less tilts always at the end towards China. Let's go to our guest in the studio, Brigadier Tariq Zaman Sahab. Tariq Zaman, we must have heard all of this discussion, the different points of views, whether it be from the US point of view, from the European point of view, and of course, as far as the relationship between Pakistan and the US. Do you really feel that we are at a standstill as far as the relationship between the US and Pakistan is concerned? Do you feel the bitter realities and of the past, such as that of Presley Amendment, will return?
What I would say that as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan has been always very sincere towards US whenever relation building is concerned or even mutual relationing is concerned. But unfortunately, we have not been receiving that sort of dividends as far as trust is concerned. You just see the example of Presley Amendment you yourself have given. Then now, situation is being repeated. But let me tell you one thing, that US will not take that risk. The bill has been presented in the session. It will go through the debate and discussion.
Of course.
But now situation has changed. Pakistan, as far as our geopolitical or strategic situation is concerned, our location, Pakistan is at much stronger position as of today. Because now you see the dynamics, relation building, China, CPAC, and then with the peace in Afghanistan, and access to the Central Asian states will be opened, and prosperity will certainly come if they are sincere to have peace in Afghanistan. Taliban are behaving as far as a situation so far is concerned. They are behaving, they are now, I would say that they are now more political, and even they are having good foreign policy as well. And give them time. What we say that every country has its own sovereignty.
Of course.
And they have the right to say and survive honorably. They were not the invaders. They were defending their country. True. Well, Pakistan sided with United States and the NATO forces. But now they themselves have withdrawn, and now they should give them time. They should not impose sanctions, because within that bill, one clause is there that United Nations should not accept Taliban government, and they should impose sanctions on them as well. And all humanitarian organizations working there, they should be also stopped. You see, they are human beings living over there. Let them
don't they understand the humanitarian angle of all of this? Don't they? I mean, human values, something that the US has been striving for.
Yeah. And you know, one point you yourself mentioned that there were no development works within the last 20 years over there. Trillions of dollars, more than $3 trillion they have spent. They have spent on just killing the human being, not developing. You see that Taliban, they have started education of women over there as well. They have opened it up. And now they needed female teachers. And you would be amazed to know that female teachers are not there because they were not educated during last 20 years. What sort of development was there? So that is so unfortunate. So I would say that now Pakistan has given very loud and clear statement by the Foreign Office, Foreign Minister. They said we should not make a scapegoat. And now you see that Pakistan has options. You are having good relations with China. You are building relations with Russia. And these blocks will materialize.
But Brigadier Zaman, why can't we have a normal relationship with the US? This is what I fail to understand.
So that is so unfortunate, because Pakistan always wanted to have normal relations, but they are more inclined toward our arch rival. You know it that Obama came here and he didn't come to Pakistan, he went over there. And you see all the presidents, right from the Bush and all, they were all inclined towards them. Still, we had been sincere with them. But unfortunately, now they are just making you a scapegoat. And one example, in that bill, one clause is there where they blamed that Pakistan has supported Taliban to clear Panjshir. You know, once they
remember all the fake media that from India that
and the video games that they were making somebody Hashir Azim as a brigadier of Pakistan Army and a few others.
And Pakistani actors that were playing a role in one of the films were portrayed as if they were army soldiers.
You see, they have forgotten their own movies of 90s and onwards.
Even now, this is what they are doing.
Devgan and all that, they are making them army officers and they are showing killings of Pakistan Army. That is unfortunate. And one more thing. Panjshir, once they went away, Kabul was taken by Taliban and the entire Afghanistan was taken by them without firing a bullet. There was no bloodshed. And now, if in Panjshir, there people supporting from our rival side, Indian side, they were supporting and they were fighting against Taliban. And finally, Taliban by themselves captured and cleared the area. And they say that Pakistan supported. Just please mark my point. That means that they never wanted that Panjshir should be cleared. They wanted the bloodshed to continue. American are those who have prepared this bill, because they said that why Panjshir was cleared. So they wanted bloodshed to be continued over there. War should continue, and why it has
that is maybe a part of their strategy. I don't understand why and how come, but nevertheless, I'd also like to quote what Sheikh Rashid Ahmed Saab said, and he rejected the allegations that Pakistan provided any military support to the Afghan Taliban as well. So it's loud and clear from the Pakistani side. We say, this is how things are. Despite that, why are you blaming us? I mean, even you must have read the opinion piece by our Prime Minister that came in the Washington Post. It was excellent, foray into what Pakistan wants.
And that is appreciated. Let me tell you that Prime Minister very maturely and positively, he said that we should build our relations on equality basis. We should not be dictated. And every country has its own right. And now last one point I would like to add, where they say they are too possessive. US is too possessive. That why we are getting closer. Just like you have a beloved, girlfriend, and she should not build relation with Mr. XYZ. You know, world is a global village nowadays. Every country would like to have his or her own interest as well.
You know, no country has really one single ally. Every country, including India, has different allies. India has Russia on one side, it has also the US on the other side. Let's go finally very quickly to my two guests that are there online, and beginning with you, Harley Schlanger. Harley, when we see, I mean, with all these discussions that have been going on, relationship, what not strategic flow of what the US wants from Pakistan, and what Pakistan, as per the US, is not delivering, do you feel there are some arenas where the two countries might be able to work or thaw things out in the future?
Well, absolutely. But it depends on the United States dropping the insistence on unilateralism, in which, as the other guests have said, recognize that other nations have sovereign rights as well. If the United States won't acknowledge that, there's no basis for cooperation, and that's an unfortunate reality. But I think that people are beginning to realize the world is changing. This is a hard lesson for the United States, but here's an example. We're obviously in a period where we need more energy, more electricity, not just in countries like Afghanistan, but Europe. We're having terrible energy crises in Europe because of the so-called Green New Deal. Instead, what we need is economic development. And Pakistan has developed certain kinds of capabilities technologically. We need nuclear power plants, we need hydro plants, we need to build up Afghanistan, you need a whole variety of expanded electric production. Here's where the United States could work with Pakistan, just as it could work with China in Africa. So there are many, many areas where there are mutual interests. And I think the idea here is we've got to get the Americans to start thinking the way the Chinese are, a win-win policy, mutual benefit. We don't
exactly.
have
I think that is the need of the hour. With this whole globalization, this is what a country as important as the US needs to do. Go for a win-win situation instead of putting one country on the side, a country that has been, really doing all its level best as far as not only normalizing its relationship with it, but also moving in the right direction as far as strategically or politically is concerned. Nevertheless, let's see what the coming days and months have, but I see a lot of ups and downs. What's your point of view, Khurram Shehzad, as far as the future of Pakistan-US relations is concerned? Do you feel that the US could or might go for a win-win situation in this whole context of blaming Pakistan for what has happened in Afghanistan?
Sure, Umar. There is one thing which is very consistent, that engaging Pakistan's youth internationally. US have created many initiatives to engage Pakistani youth. So that is something they're already working on. But the blaming Pakistan will never, actually it will multiply in coming years, since the whole thing is coming to the Biden administration, and especially the Democrat. If you look into the President Obama's 8 years in Afghanistan, it was total failure of foreign policy. Obama tried 8 years India's into Afghanistan, which never worked. So that is coming, the whole blame is actually shifting towards the Democrats. So, and Biden is trying to prevent that, and the only way he or the political arena in the Senate and Congress from the Democrat side is to blame Pakistan. So that is much easier things to do at the moment. But to escalate it, there are many lobbyists who are trying to escalate at the U.S. position for Pakistan. But at the same time, the people like establishment, for example, they wanted to have good relationship because 20 years in the region, to protect the interests in the region, they need Pakistan in the region. And especially when they say that no, Pakistan going very close to the China and the neighbors, Iran, for example. And Pakistan is not going to be another Saudi Arabia who can do anything what US asked them to do for Iran or other countries. So in that perspective, this is that I'm telling you, the narrative comes from Pentagon. They're saying Pakistan even more relevant for US. in the coming years, and Pakistan, to watch Pakistan's interests, to make sure Pakistan is a safe country, to make the prosperity for the social development in Pakistan, and engaging the youth and empowering the youth even more critical now than it ever before in the last 20 years. So I think moving forward, if Pakistan plays a better game internationally, I think it will be more relevant for US-Pakistan relation. There will be more opportunity to strengthen the relationship.
All right. Now, last question from you, Brigadier Retired Tariq Zaman Saab. If I had to ask you in one single phrase, after all of this discussion, what you foresee as far as Pak-US ties are concerned? Are you optimistic, cautiously optimistic, or pessimistic?
Well, I would remain in between the two.
Cautiously
well,
optimistic.
I think US will not take that risk. This is my personal analysis. They would not like to lose Pakistan, and they would not like that it should be bagged by China in totality. China is a close time-tested friend with us.
Understood.
And they would not like that because if they are sincere with Pakistan, well, they should take the risk. Because then Pakistan will have its own strategy, Pakistan will have its own allies, and it will flourish its economy because we never, we won't like to remain dependent through and through. And we should not expect, one should be realistic, we should not expect much from them. Things should be very clear, this way or that way. Well, if you want to lose us, go ahead. And they won't take that risk. This is my guess.
All right. Let's see, only time will be the true test of the relationship, and it will decide what will happen. I mean, let's put things very bluntly. The ball is in the US's court. Pakistan has done everything it can as far as normalizing, strengthening the relationship and cooperation with the US. Despite all the negativity that is emanating currently from the US, whether it be through the bill, whether it be through the other measures or the statements that have been emanating from the US, one thing is for certain: Pakistan has been, if we say pragmatically or realistically, very positive and optimistic and strong as far as its relationship with all the countries is concerned, including the United States of America. Let's hope that the US finally comes to terms with it and understands the real tangent of the relationship and works towards strengthening the current bond between the countries that exists. And I mean, when you have a strong relationship between important countries around the world, that is how regions develop, that is how regions also go forward. And Pakistan and this whole region needs development and needs prosperity. And with the US and other important powers backing Pakistan and the region for that prosperity, that is how our region will become strong. I hope the US realizes that. With that, we come to an end of today's Views on News. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.